The Accidental President. Part 9. The Siege of Abuja. Setting: the presidential villa, Abuja. The news of General Kalu's death had spread rapidly, but instead of signaling the end of the conflict, it had sparked a final, desperate surge from his loyalists. These die-hard followers, led by Brigadier General Olatunji, were determined to continue Kalu's mission even in the face of overwhelming odds. They had nothing left to lose, and they set their sights on Abuja, the heart of Joshua Odum's power. Joshua Odum, standing in the command center of the presidential villa, knew that the final battle was imminent. The remnants of Kalu's forces were converging on the capital, intent on delivering a fatal blow. Reports from intelligence agents indicated that Olatunji had taken command of these forces, rallying them with promises of revenge and the hope of disrupting Joshua's government one last time. Adorora, her face lined with exhaustion but still resolute, joined Joshua as they reviewed the latest updates. "Joshua, Olatunji is leading the assault. He's rallied what's left of Kalu's forces, and they're preparing for a full-scale attack on the city. They've already begun targeting our infrastructure, power grids, communication lines, and transportation hubs." Joshua nodded, absorbing the information. Olatunji is trying to weaken us before launching the main assault. He knows that if he can create chaos within the city, it will be easier to break our defenses. Adorora's voice was steady but laced with concern. "We've reinforced key positions, but we're spread thin. The civilians are scared, and there's already talk of panic in some neighborhoods. If we don't maintain control, the situation could spiral out of our hands." Joshua's gaze hardened as he looked out over the city. Abuja had become the last stronghold, the final barrier between Olatunji's forces and the collapse of everything they had fought for. The burden of leadership weighed heavily on him, but he knew that there was no turning back. "We need to hold the line, no matter what," Joshua said with determination. "Olatunji is counting on fear and chaos to give him the upper hand. We can't let that happen. Mobilize all available forces and make sure our communication lines remain open. We'll coordinate our defenses from here, but we need to keep morale high." Adorora nodded and moved quickly to execute the orders, coordinating with military leaders and civilian authorities to ensure that the city was as prepared as possible. The battle for Abuja was about to begin, and they needed to be ready for anything. Setting: Olatunji's forward base, near Abuja. Brigadier General Olatunji stood before his assembled officers in a makeshift command tent just outside Abuja. The men and women who had followed him this far were a mix of hardened soldiers and desperate loyalists, all of them united by the devotion to Kalu's cause. They knew that this was their last stand, and Olatunji intended to make it a memorable one. "The time has come," Olatunji began, his voice carrying the weight of authority and resolve. "General Kalu may be gone, but his mission lives on. We are the last line of defense for everything he fought for. Abuja is the heart of Odum's power. If we take the city, we take Nigeria." The officers nodded in grim agreement. They knew what was at stake, and they were ready to do whatever it took to achieve victory, even if it meant their own deaths. "Our strategy is simple," Olatunji continued, pointing to a map of Abuja spread out on the table. "We'll hit them where it hurts, targeting power stations, communication hubs, and key government buildings. We create chaos, disrupt their command structure, and then we move in for the kill." Olatunji paused, his eyes sweeping across the room. "This is our last chance. We either win here, or we die trying. But know this, whatever happens today, we will make sure Odum and his allies remember our names." With a final nod of approval from his officers, Olatunji gave the order to begin the assault. The time for planning was over. Now it was time for action. Setting: the streets of Abuja. As dawn broke over Abuja, the city was already a hive of activity. Soldiers patrolled the streets, setting up barricades and fortifying key positions. The tension was palpable, with everyone bracing for the inevitable clash. The citizens, too, were preparing. Many had sought refuge in safer parts of the city, while others stayed behind to support the defenders in any way they could. The first explosions rocked the city just as the sun began to rise. Olatunji's forces struck with precision, targeting power stations and communication hubs, plunging entire sections of the city into darkness. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire and the wails of sirens as emergency services scrambled to respond. Joshua, standing in the command center, received the reports with grim determination. They've started the assault. Olatunji is following through on his threats. Adaora, who had been monitoring the situation closely, spoke urgently. Our forces are engaged on multiple fronts. Olatunji's men are using guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, and ambushes. They're trying to stretch us thin. Joshua nodded, his mind racing as he considered their options. We need to focus on protecting the city's infrastructure and keeping the lines of communication open. If Olatunji succeeds in cutting us off, it will be much harder to coordinate our defenses. Despite the chaos, Joshua knew that they couldn't afford to panic. The defenders needed to hold the ground and maintain control of the city. The battle for Abuja would be decided by who could outlast the other, and Joshua was determined that it would be his side. Setting: the heart of the siege. As the hours passed, the battle for Abuja intensified. Olatunji's forces, though outnumbered, fought with a ferocity that belied the dwindling numbers. They struck from hidden positions, using the city's labyrinthine streets to their advantage. Every block, every building, became a battleground. The defenders, led by seasoned commanders like Major Nnamdi Okoye, were pushed to their limits. They fought valiantly, but the strain of the prolonged conflict was beginning to show. Casualties were mounting, and supplies were running low. In the midst of the fighting, Okoye received a critical message from one of his scouts. Major, we've identified Olatunji's command post. It's heavily guarded, but if we can take it out, it could disrupt their entire operation. Okoye knew that this could be the turning point they needed. Send me the coordinates. I'll lead a team myself. As Okoye prepared for the mission, he knew the risks were high. But if they succeeded in taking out Olatunji, it could break the back of the assault and give Abuja a fighting chance. Setting: Olatunji's command post, Abuja outskirts. Olatunji watched the battle unfold from his command post, his face set in grim determination. The siege was going as planned. Odum's forces were stretched thin, and the city was teetering on the edge of chaos. But he knew that the real test was yet to come. If he could maintain the pressure, the city would fall. But just as he was about to give the order for the final push, one of his officers rushed into the room, his face pale. Brigadier, we have a situation. Odum's forces are closing in on our position. They've identified the command post. Olatunji's eyes narrowed. They're trying to cut off our head. Prepare for a counterattack. We can't let them disrupt the operation. As his men scrambled to reinforce the defenses, Olatunji steeled himself for the coming fight. He knew that if they lost the command post, the assault would falter. But he was not about to let that happen. Setting: the streets of Abuja. Major Okoye and his team moved swiftly through the war-torn streets, navigating the chaos with practiced efficiency. They knew they were heading into the lion's den, but they also knew that this was their best chance to end the siege. As they approached the command post, Okoye signaled for his team to halt. They crouched behind a low wall, surveying the heavily guarded entrance. The odds were against them, but they had no choice but to push forward. Team 1, create a diversion on the east side, Okoye ordered. Team 2, follow me. We'll breach from the west. The plan was risky, but it was their only option. With a nod, the teams moved into position. Moments later, the sound of gunfire erupted from the east as Team 1 engaged the enemy, drawing their attention away from the main entrance. Okoye led Team 2 in a swift, silent advance toward the western entrance. They took out the guards with precise, efficient shots and breached the entrance, moving through the building with deadly focus. As they neared the command room, Okoye felt the tension mounting. They were close, so close to ending the nightmare that Olatunji had brought upon the city. But they had to be careful. Olatunji was a seasoned commander, and he wouldn't go down without a fight. Prepare to breach, Okoye ordered as they reached the door to the command room. The soldiers readied their weapons, and with a swift motion, they stormed the room. Inside, chaos erupted. Olatunji's officers scrambled to respond, but Okoye's team moved with the precision of well-trained soldiers. They took down the guards and secured the room, covering every exit. At the center of the room, Brigadier General Olatunji stood, a look of defiance in his eyes as he realized his position had been compromised. "So, it's come to this," Olatunji said, his voice calm despite the situation. "You think taking me down will end this war? Kalu's cause won't die with me." Major Okoye, his weapon trained on Olatunji, stepped forward. "This ends now, Olatunji. Your forces are scattered, and Abuja will hold. Surrender, and maybe we can prevent more bloodshed." Olatunji's eyes flashed with anger. "You don't understand, do you? This isn't about one city, or one battle. This is about a legacy. About reshaping Nigeria into something stronger, something greater." Kalu saw the truth, and so do I. We're the ones willing to do what it takes. Okoye's gaze hardened. "What you're doing is tearing this country apart. Kalu is dead, and with him, his vision. All you're doing now is causing more suffering." Olatunji shook his head, a bitter smile on his lips. "You're naive, Major. The world doesn't change through peace. It changes through power, through force." Before Okoye could respond, Olatunji made a sudden move, reaching for a concealed weapon. But Okoye was faster. A single shot rang out, and Olatunji staggered, falling to the ground. The room fell silent as the life drained from the Brigadier General's eyes, his hand still clutching the weapon he never got to fire. For a moment, there was only the sound of heavy breathing, the aftermath of violence hanging thick in the air. "It's over," Okoye said quietly, lowering his weapon. "The siege is over." He quickly ordered his team to secure the area and make contact with the rest of their forces. The death of Olatunji would soon ripple through the ranks of Kalu's loyalists, demoralizing them and breaking their will to fight. Setting: the streets of Abuja. As word of Olatunji's death spread, the momentum of the battle shifted dramatically. The remaining loyalist forces, already strained and disorganized, began to falter. Without their leader, and with the defenders of Abuja mounting a relentless counterattack, the loyalists found themselves increasingly outmatched. Joshua Odum, back in the command center, received the news of Olatunji's death with a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. The battle for Abuja was nearing its end, but the cost had been high. The city lay in ruins, and the people had suffered greatly. "Joshua, we're receiving reports that Olatunji's forces are retreating," Adaora said, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "They're scattering, some are surrendering, others are trying to flee the city. The siege is breaking." Joshua nodded, though the weight of the victory pressed heavily on him. "We need to secure the city and prevent any further loss of life. Focus on protecting civilians and restoring order. This has to end now." Adaora quickly relayed the orders, coordinating with military and emergency services to bring the battle to a close. The defenders, buoyed by the news of Olatunji's death, redoubled their efforts, pushing the loyalists out of the city and securing key positions. Setting: the presidential villa, Abuja. By nightfall, the sounds of battle had quieted. The siege of Abuja was over, and Joshua Odum stood on the balcony of the presidential villa, looking out over the city. The streets were still smoldering, and the scars of the battle were everywhere. But Abuja had held, and with it, the hope for a united Nigeria. Adaora joined him, her face reflecting the exhaustion of the day's events. "It's done, Joshua. Olatunji is gone, and his forces are in disarray. We've secured the city." Joshua nodded, though his expression remained somber. "We've won this battle, but the war has taken its toll. The city is in ruins, and the people are weary. Rebuilding won't be easy." Adaora placed a hand on his arm, offering silent support. "We'll rebuild.